You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.
So hi everyone and welcome once again to Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all. This is the place to be if you are someone looking at how you can leave your mark on the world and what are the experiences, the stories, the journey that other people who are doing phenomenal things out there experience. So if you're curious about all of that, you are in the right place. Changing Reality is a show that features brilliant people from all walks of life who are in essence changing their own reality. And through this show, we have the amazing opportunity to speak and interview truly phenomenal individuals, from social change makers, entrepreneurs, business owners, to industry leaders, experts, VPs at top companies, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world. And by hearing these stories of how they inspire others, of their own journeys, what got them started, hopefully we'll be able to pick out the little nuggets of wisdom that help us in doing the things that we are passionate about and in crafting our own journeys. And I wanted to do this show simply because I feel like there are so many people out there who make waves in the lives of those around them. And I'm very passionate about hearing how these stories can actually be brought out so that together we can explore and shorten the learning curves of the rest of us who are just getting started in a sense. And the power of stories has been something that has been so instrumental to my journey. It's been so instrumental to the journey of people all around me. And to show you how important the effect that simple stories can have. I actually personally am one of the founders and currently the CEO of a youth movement called Ascendance that was founded back in Malaysia, where I'm from, that today collaborates not just with our Malaysian Ministry of Education, but with global education partners across 28 countries to provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So we've been fortunate to work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, programs, experiential learning activities, and projects that help them discover their passion, learn about themselves and the world around them through hands-on experiences in a sense, and at the same time come back and create their own careers that have meaningful impact not just for themselves, but for those around them as well. And to date, we've worked with over 35,000 students, 970 over communities, and have incubated countless number of student entrepreneurs, social enterprises run by students as young as 8 to 25 years old that help today everyday students change their reality. And the reason we've been able to do that is stories. It's because of kind individuals who spend their time, their energy to share the things that they've gone through with the younger generation, with the next generation who will be coming up. And today's speaker is extremely special because he's actually been someone who's been pivotal in the work that Ascendance does and is truly an inspiration to, I think, all of us on not just the work that he does and his own personal story that we'll be talking about today, but also in the support that he's given, not just Ascendance, but likewise causes all around to help the younger generation grow. So we have today the Senior Vice President and General Manager at Avery Dennison's Europe, Middle East, and North Africa regions for global innovation in their label and graphic materials division. In his capacity, he's responsible for the short and the long-term financial strategies, operating objectives, and so much more. He leads and also sponsors Avery Dennison's graphic solutions businesses globally. And he's also held several other innovation and business leadership roles even before his role at Avery Dennison, a Fortune 500 company today. Prior to joining Avery Dennison, he served as the Vice President and Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at H.B. Fuller in Minnesota from 2012 to 2016. And even prior to that, he was Vice President of Strategic Growth Platforms at Ashland's Specialty Ingredients Operating Unit. And in that role, he actually served in commercial roles, increasing the responsibility, helping their global business unit. And he was also director of consumer and industries from pharmaceuticals, food, personal care, and so much more. He also holds a PhD in material chemistry from Florida State University, where he holds over 30 publications and patents. And today is someone, as I said, who has been instrumental in the work we do with Ascendance. Ascendance, for all of you who do not know, actually recently started a project with Avery Dennison to help 3,600 students all across Malaysia to actually gain access to resources and, I would say, the opportunities to go out there, discover what they love doing, and improve in their communication, their strategy, their innovation, and so much more. And he's one of the people who has been an amazing amazing support in enabling us to do that work. So it's my pleasure to bring our phenomenal guest speaker onto our virtual stage. Let's welcome Hassan.
Thank you,
Hello.
Harsha. Thank you for the introduction. Good to be with you here today this morning.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you do. I'm so inspired just by reading the introduction. I'm a little worried that you'll say something too mind-blowing for us to handle. So thank you so much for joining our show today. Where are you tuning in from today?
I'm actually based in Atlanta this morning, Georgia, in the southeastern United States. So,
Okay, I've heard it's a beautiful place, and I know that means it's pretty early for you when we're having this session. So thank you for taking the time. And I know 8:30 may not be too early for you, but for college students, it's
it's a
terrible in
little
a
bit,
sense.
8:15 is a little bit almost lunchtime for these
Oh,
type of, yeah.
okay, almost lunchtime. All right, kids, get up earlier. That's my message from right off the bat. But one of the things that I find so interesting is that you are incredibly successful in the work that you do. You are the VP and GM of different segments of continents, in a sense, in a Fortune 500 company. And at the same time, you also have done so many other things. You have a PhD in chemistry, which definitely is not easy to have a PhD in anything, let alone chemistry. You have, as we mentioned, 30 over patents and publications. You seem to excel in everything, in a sense. So for us students, that may be a little bit stressful to imagine in a way. So maybe we start off this interview a little easily. What actually inspired you when you were younger, when you were a student, in a sense, to pursue the fields that you're in today, organic chemistry and the things that you do? Was there a particular person? I think when we chatted previously, you said it was family, teachers. But what really was that inspiration that set you on the path you are today?
No, thank you, Harsha. I think you're giving me too much credit, but let's go back to the genesis of the story. When I was growing up, I was in elementary school. One of my role models, to be very honest, was my uncle, my mother's brother. And at the time, I grew up in Lebanon, so he immigrated to the United States, and he did a PhD in chemistry as well. And he also moved to Atlanta, and he did it at Georgia Tech. So he was my initial inspiration. Kind of, we talked a lot, and he did really well in life. So my connection with that was, oh, if you do chemistry, that means it's you'll do good things. So that was my initial inspiration. But second part of that is my own personality. I always like to take stuff and make bigger stuff out of them that creates more value, right? Whether it's building things when I was younger, um, working with a lot of my friends and people of my age at the time to create stuff, construct stuff. So I think that's where kind of part of the DNA comes in, but also you got the inspiration from my uncle, and that's what really started. So when I was in middle school, I knew back then I wanted to do a bachelor in chemistry, and then who knows where it goes from there. But I knew at a very early age I wanted to do chemistry, so I did not even apply to college. I put chemistry as my first choice, and I put engineering as the second choice, but I did not put physics or biology. I knew I want to do chemistry. That's how early it was, actually, middle school, and I focused so intensely on it. So when I got to college, it was really kind of an outcome of something I've been planning for a few years until I got there. So.
No, but I think that's very true. I think our passion and figuring that out can sometimes be at that intersection of the inspiration, the environment, of people around us, and also how it aligns with our own personality. You mentioned you used to build things even when you were in school. What was the earliest thing that you remember building or that you remember creating, in a sense? It could be in college, it could be even earlier in middle school.
Yeah, even when I was very young, we used to live in kind of middle to lower class neighborhood. So what we did there is you bring a lot of pieces of wood, a lot of nails, and all of that, and then you just build your own stuff, right? You build trucks and cars and little houses and things like that. So you could argue this might be engineering, right? But to me, it's beyond that. It's you're bringing ingredients to make something, an outcome of those ingredients that's very different from the ingredients, which is really the definition of a chemistry, right? You put A, B, C, you end up with D, which is completely different ingredient than what you started with. You just have to put temperature and energy and pressure and things like that, and you'll end up with very different ingredients. So those were some of my earlier experiences when I was younger, when I got really interested in making things bigger, faster, things like that. So
Okay, very cool. Like chemistry is essentially like the very basic of the building blocks of all of these things. So okay, I see the connection. I see the connection. But I feel like many times, especially as students, that jump from kind of like high school to college it can be a little tough in a sense. It's a whole different environment. It's a whole very different place of academic rigor. How is it like you entering college, knowing what you wanted to do? Was the subject matter, was the experience exactly like how you imagined it to be, since you already had this goal since middle school? Or did it also take an adjustment period? Was that something, was it harder than you expected? Was it too easy for you?
no, I think one learning I would share, to be very honest, is when I graduated from high school, I was in the top 1% of my class. The cultural shock is when you go to university, you're not unique. Everybody
Oh,
who got to that university, very likely they're in the top of their class or top 5% in their class. So suddenly you enter your first semester of college and you go to class and suddenly realize you look normal. So it's a humbling experience, to be honest. So my first semester at the university, once I finished my high school, was, hey, we need to recalibrate here because you're no longer scoring 95 on 100, 95 on 100 in every single exam. Now everybody in the class is equally or even better than you. So you have to almost increase your intensity, your competitive spirit. So that was an adjustment. So I advise all of you, your first semester in college might feel a bit strange, even if you're the top of your class in your high school. You're going to meet a lot of people like you or even smarter than you, which is actually great because that's where you learn the most. So that was my first learning I would share. It was very frustrating to me my first semester because I felt like, this is no longer my old operating ground or ecosystem. Now it's a little bit much more difficult, but that's where you learn the most, is when you stretch yourself. So I would say embrace it, but knowing that it will happen, it's good to be prepared for it. I was not. So when I went to the first semester, it was a little bit more an adjustment for me. Once I get to the second and third semester, things went very well. The same thing when I got to my PhD. It's another level of adjustment, right? Moving to a different country, different culture. PhD is much higher intensity in terms of course intensity and academia than the bachelor. So all of these adjustments, I think, be prepared mentally to absorb the first shock. Once you get over that, I think it'll be relatively easy, I would say.
no, it's very good. And another thing that you also mentioned is moving to a different country and adjusting to the way that that culture is. Tell me a little bit about that experience as well, because I feel like I know many of our students have been recently with the pandemic, their parents are moving, some of them like are in a new space in a way, or some of them are just leaving for college and they've been lucky to go to a different space and absorb the environment from there. And I know that having trouble adjusting is tough, whether you're just moving from one school to another or one country to another. So I can only imagine for you it was much more intense than what a lot of our students experience today. How did you start really adapting and feel making yourself at home in a new environment?
Yeah, I think my advice to all the students out there, when I made that move, I think the number one thing to me that helped a lot is to start immediately building your own network in that ecosystem, network and the community, at the university, at the high school, whatever you're moving to. And I think focus on the points of similarities and not get hung up too much on the points of difference, right? So when you move to a new culture, new area, it's easy to list 10 things that are different and then you'll go nowhere. I think I would flip it on its head. I would just say, okay, here's the 10 or 15 things that are similar, and here's where I'm going to put 95% of my energy to build those connectivities. So I built a very strong network very quickly with my peer colleagues, students, classmates, roommates, professors. I went to conferences, and I got very comfortable very quickly. I think within 3 to 4 months, I got really comfortable. It felt like home again. It did help that the weather and the humidity was very similar to the East Mediterranean in Florida, so it's always hot and warm. So felt at home immediately from that perspective. But from a professional perspective, I think having that network was extremely helpful. And on a personal level, create a network of friends and start sharing and learning the similarities, and then also connect with some associations that exist at these universities, like the International Student Center, the Chemistry Student Association. You get so many things there that you could connect with people that are like-minded but also oppositely minded. That's where you also could learn the most as well. But that'll be my advice, Harsha. So
No, that's a good point. I know many people who go to a new space and they get a little bit worried about all the differences that they just end up finding people who are exactly the same like as them in a sense, and they end up being in that group. So I really like that point about looking for the similarities
yeah.
instead of
Focus on the similarities. The differences will become very small once you have many points of connection on similarities. If you start with the differences, it'll become much harder hill to climb. So
Okay, all right. And speaking about tough experiences while at university, I think you mentioned, yeah, you did your PhD, and again, that's never an easy experience. I know someone who's doing a PhD right now in business, and they are having the time, like they're cracking their head trying to figure it out. I can only imagine in a subject like chemistry, which is a lot more. I would say that requires a lot more thought into it and a lot more scientific rigor. I can only imagine that it's 100 times more tougher than anything that they could imagine in a sense. What tell us a little bit about your experience, kind of like taking on a little bit of a more different role. PhD is not just about studying; it's about research. It's about finding out new things in a sense. And you, I think, had so many different projects and papers on things like membrane design for water filtration, hydrogen fuel cells, like chemical separations. How did you go about kind of understanding the research part of all of these things in a sense, and applying that, and also maybe tell us what was your favorite among all of these projects?
yeah, no. So I think when you do PhD in any program, I think they're all equally challenging. So I would not necessarily say chemistry seems like a scary topic,
Well,
but it's
okay.
not really. I mean, they're all need the right mindset, the right intensity, whether it's PhD in business or physics or biology or chemistry or engineering, etc. They're all equally challenging. I think the key in my mind is to understand the concept, number one, and then have a passion for it. So I think those are very equally important topics. Do not do a PhD in physics because your parents or your neighbors or your sister or your brother wants you to do it. I mean, do something that you're really passionate about, that you believe in, and that gets you really excited. That's one. And number two, make sure you understand the concepts. Many of us, if you don't understand a concept, you try to go around it by memorizing the equation or try to solve 15 problems and hope one of them the professor takes the same exact one, put in the exam. You could get a full score that one time, but as soon as they change some dimensions or parameters, you will not know how to solve it. So my only advice is make sure between you and yourself you understand the primary concept behind any of these topics, and I think that helped me a lot in the chemistry side. And it goes without saying, it comes with the great teachers. I think in some of these cases, a teacher could make a huge difference, whether you completely grasp the fundamental concepts of the topic or you skirt over it because you did not really understand it and you start memorizing the equations, and that's the worst thing you could do. So I use organic chemistry as an example. You could ask many of the medical doctors out there. It is probably one of the hardest courses they've taken in their curriculum, including medical school. I have a lot of friends who are medical doctors, and they really, really struggled with organic chemistry. It's not very easy unless you grasp it to the core. And to me, that was a topic. If you really understand the basics, and I give a lot of credit to my teachers. One was, God bless his soul, he passed away in middle and high school back in Lebanon. He was unbelievable at breaking down the concepts to the very bare minimum, so you could grasp it, you understand it, and you never need to memorize any equation. You could literally get the answer by going through it logically. The same in undergraduate. One of my professors there, she was really outstanding. She's a professor at Stanford. She graduated from Stanford, and now she's a professor at McGill University in Canada. But she was outstanding distilling the concept of organic chemistry. So again, I think go back to the beginning, find your passion in the topic. Number two, make sure you understand the concepts, and number three, make sure you have good teachers that could help you understand those concepts at a very basic level that makes you very well suited to understand the concept and then explain it to somebody else. If you cannot explain something to somebody in 60 seconds in a very simple way, that means you don't understand it yourself.
Oh, okay. If you can't explain something in 60 seconds, oh gosh, then I don't think half of the things that I think if someone did try to explain to me in 60 seconds, I might not still get it. So I think maybe for the students who are going out there, whether they are in elementary or whether they are in high school, in a sense, I think, or doing their PhD, I think that's a good rule of thumb in a sense. Understand it and be able to kind of reiterate it in a way. That's a good one.
Yeah, even the new concepts, Harsha, like cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence and metaverse. If somebody gives you 15-minute answer, you lose your attention span by the time the answer is finished. That was my point. So it's directionally, I think if you cannot explain something in simple terms to somebody else, that means you don't understand it yourself deep enough to simplify it. So that's the way I look at it, right?
Okay, yeah, but I'm the kind of person where if I don't understand something new and fancy, I'll go and Google how like metaverse explained to kids in a sense, and then I'll just try to learn about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not a bad approach. You need, I mean, everything needs to be simplified in layman terms so people could get it, right? If you speak in a very sophisticated way, even chemistry is very easy to explain. I mean, polymer, right? I mean, you could explain it in a visual and people gets it very quickly, right? So
Okay, I think some of our students would disagree that chemistry is easy, but I'm going to vote for you for your opinion in a sense that it's the way it's explained in a sense. Okay, cool. And hopefully one day we have to get you in to explain these things and in 60 seconds to our students instead. Yeah.
be very happy to. Yes.
Really? Okay, I'm definitely taking you up on that after this. But moving on in a sense, even after your time in the research world, I think you moved into the corporate world. So you completed your PhD. Your next role, I think, was at Ashland. You were their team leader for technology. This is also a bit of a pivot in a sense, right? You go from an academic setting to a corporate world setting. How is it like from and I've heard that they're two very drastically different worlds. How is it like carrying your expertise, the things that you're learning, and now having to implement it in a practical, say, dealing with on one side team members, clients, reports in a way? How did you learn to integrate the knowledge that you had, and at the same time not only balance it with application but also balancing it with communicating it to a wider audience?
No, that's a very good question. I go back to what I shared earlier. Anytime you make a shift or a change in your career trajectory or personal trajectory, you need to challenge yourself, be very open for new learning, and embrace the unknown so you could move forward. So I had that experience from high school to my first semester in college, where we said you're in the top of your class, and then suddenly you're an average. And how do you make that adjustment? Then the next move was going from the Middle East to the United States of America. Cultural adjustment, more challenging, major. The third adjustment was when you graduate and you think you could walk on water because you just got a PhD in chemistry, and then suddenly you go into an industrial setting where you really need to take all these learnings that you had or theoretical concepts, and now you have to bring them into practicality. I remember my first projects was creating the next generation formulation of 2-in-1 conditioning shampoos for Procter and Gamble and Unilever and L'Oreal, right? So suddenly you have to take all the principles you learned on surfactant chemistry and polymer chemistry and colloid chemistry and try to put them into that specific formulation, right? And I mean, it was challenging, I would say, to be very honest. Again, it took 2-3 months adjustments to make that mental switch from academics to practicality. But I think you'll find the sweet spot because you'll have very good people around you. People have a lot of experience. They have the same path like you. They were in academia and now they're senior innovators at those companies, and they'll lead you along. But you also have to take initiatives and personal responsibility to be able to learn in your own and try to make that mental adjustment. So that was another change. To me, it was just one more change, just different setting. Yeah. So I mean, every time you make a change in life like that, if you move a country, you move a major, you find a new job, etc., or a new challenging opportunity within your existing company, you'll find these adjustments that you need to make very quickly, and life moves on, and then you're on to the next thing, right?
No, it's cool. It's like you have the formula for change in a way, and if you've mastered it, it works essentially like a chemical formula. It will work in the same conditions, even if it's a different scenario in a way. Like if I'm right with this analogy, okay.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely. And if you want to accelerate the chemical reaction, it's always easy. Either raise the temperature or raise the pressure. And it moves much faster, right? There's a
Okay.
formula. There's a formula you should remember roughly. For every 10 degrees Celsius, you increase the temperature, the reaction rate doubles. That's something as a rule of thumb you could remember.
Okay, I like that. I like that. How do you manage pressure and temperature? This is something I'm struggling with personally, in a sense. So even like as someone and a lot of our students also, they take on a lot of new things. They're running businesses while they're studying this. So suddenly it seems that we jump every now and then, every couple of months to a new level. And as you said, the pressure gets a bit more. The stress builds up. You don't manage things better. And of course, we know in hindsight, a month or two, you come out of it stronger. But in that moment, it can be a lot to cope with, in a sense. Have you ever been in a situation like this where the temperature's been turned up and you're not exactly sure what to do, in a sense? And how do we navigate that?
No, it does happen quite a bit, to be honest. It's not unusual. I mean, all of us been through these pressure cooker situations. I think,
It's the catalyst.
yeah, exactly. The things you need to remember is you control what you control, right? So anytime you have a pressure test situation, I think you need to just take a step back, sit by yourself, and list all the pressure situation, where it's coming from. There's 3 or 4 reasons why things are happening, right? And go through the list and see which ones you could control, right? And which ones you do not control. The ones you do not control, maybe you could influence. So you should try that, but you should absolutely spend your energy or most of your energy on the stuff you could control, right? So control the controllables. I mean, it's a cliche statement, but it does really work. Control what you control within your span of control. That's number one. The second thing you should always remember, if you're alive and you're healthy and you're taking care of yourself, everything else is beatable, right? And it's easy. You ask yourself, are you alive? If you answer, you are. And if you're healthy, then everything else is beatable. Material stuff, money, challenges, they all come and go. So as long as you take good care of yourself, physically and mentally, I think you could conquer any problem, right? There's no limit for the human brain or human power to what you could achieve if you stay locked in and make sure you control what you control. So that'll be my advice, and try to deflect some of these noise, I call. And I'm sure many of the students that'll be listening to this, each one of them, I'm almost certain, had their own challenges going up, right? I grew in a region that has a lot of wars and all of that. So, it did happen, that you cannot feel sorry for yourself. You just make the best out of it. The fact that you've been in that environment makes you feel much more resilient to challenges and changes like that. And so that's an area I think students should reflect on and see what were challenges that they grew up when they were a kid or early teenagers, and then use that to build resiliency for them in the later years in life as they face bigger challenges. But start with your core. I think once you start with your core, build a very strong core, you'll become literally unbeatable in terms of how strong you are mentally and physically. That'll be my advice.
No, very, very, very well said, in a way, in a very enlightened perspective. I'm also curious, in a sense, if a lot of your career, in a sense, was on one way in the beginning. I think for everyone doing the actual physical chemistry part of things and all, and then it goes into more of a managerial position. And they say not everyone who's good at the work itself is good at managing people and whatever, and that is a completely different skill in itself. How do you bring this really, I would say, high level of looking at things and looking like, because you seem to have like this very well thought out way of managing this pressure, of managing all of this. How do you bring that to your team, and how do you kind of make sure that during like pain points in the year or times where things are stressful and all, that your team is able to grow and they're able to share this in a way?
Yeah, I think, in my view, Harsha, I think the best way you could be a very good leader is to understand the details of what your team is working on. And the way to do that is to have one of those responsibilities or jobs before you become a leader. That's where, when I started doing chemistry, I was the guy. I did not have even a technician or anybody support. I was the person literally mixing some of these formulations and ingredients and chemical reactions to create the next generation products. That started at Ashland, right? My first job. I was doing it, and then when I moved to a team leader, when I speak to my team, you got very high credibility, because when you talk about formulation, you were doing it just 2 years ago. You know exactly what they're mixing, all of that. The key is to step out of it and not is to coach and not micromanage, because if you know how to do it, if you know some of the answers, it'll be counterproductive if you give them the answer. I think you need to step out of what you knew before. I know it's a little bit challenging initially to step out of your previous role, but you have to take a more helicopter view and give them directionally. Say, if you make this formula, you should try this class of materials, without saying which specific molecule, right? And then that started with chemistry. So transitioning into the business, once I did that for 2 or 3 years, I realized very quickly I would like to be in a position where we decide the direction of the innovation program, not on the specific program. So I went to talk to my leader, and he agreed with me. He said, "Yeah, you seem you have a very high instincts to lead a business." So he said, "Why don't we support you to go get your MBA in finance?" He said, "That's a good way for you to also find academically if you like it." So that's what I did. And as soon as I finished, they moved me immediately to the business side. I moved to marketing, strategy, and then P&L very quickly over a 5-year window when I was at Ashland. So it was another same story, repeats itself, another change or transition. Now you're shifting disciplines from a pure R&D to marketing to strategy to P&L, and I've done it multiple times. I think getting used to the only constant is change in your mindset is a very powerful way of looking at things. Nothing is fixed. Everything is changing, and then you need to change faster than change is coming at you. I think that's the way that you could always stay on par or ahead.
No, change faster than change.
Change faster than change itself. Exactly. Just keep evolving.
Okay, change faster. Okay, I'm getting that on the t-shirt. Change faster than change is coming at you. Okay, nice. And I think you did your MBA at the University of Delaware. I think you had a 3.95 CGPA, which is crazy. And okay, I thought you said it'd be difficult at university. How'd you get 3.95? But I'm okay. Moving on from that. One of the things that I think many people often, or at least something that I've heard, and I think people complain about me and my dad like at times as well, is that there's a little bit of like people who are setting the strategy don't always understand what is happening in the production or in the actual manufacturing it. So that has been something that I think I've heard corporate people have in a very small experience in running a sentence. At times I set the targets, or I set the meetings and all of that, and then the team who's doing the production end of it and doing the traveling and all, it's like we're gonna die following this timetable in a sense. So there's always at times I feel this difference of communication. You've been in both roles in a way. And tell me about how after doing your MBA, coming back with this new information in a sense, and again, applying that into your role. How was it like for you to breach that change in a sense? And how do you balance both pushing towards a new strategy and at the same time having to coax people out of their comfort zone and balance their needs at the same time?
No, absolutely. I think education is great. I mean, there's nobody will debate with you against it. It's great to have academic degrees and all of that, because it teaches you all the basics, the theory, the academics. I think the key is how do you take all that knowledge and bring it to practicality and into real life situation, right? So I think that's where the rubber hits the road, like they say. So I think what you need to do is embrace it. So if any of you get the opportunity, scholarship, whatever it is, a grant, opportunity to go learn, go for it. But make sure as soon as you're done, you very quickly start bringing it to life. So in a real life example, I mean, you could put the best strategy on paper you could dream of, but you need to also triangulate and validate that strategy by talking to your ecosystem. That could be your customers, your suppliers, your experts in your industry. And the best way to learn that is to just go out and do it. Just like Nike's logo, just do it. Don't make 75 theories about what could happen, what could not happen. You should do that initially, do some scenario planning, but then you need to go and test it on the market. The same applies for innovation. I think if you come up with a great innovation, don't wait until it's perfected, because if you wait until it's perfected, life moved on. Your competitors, your customers, they moved on into the next latest and greatest. So people like who invented the iPhone and the smartphones, if they wait for perfection, they would have never launched the first generation and the second generation. You keep waiting for the fifth generation, right? So I think iterate on the move, be very comfortable with very agile, very fast decision making when you're doing innovation, and iterate on the fly as you go. I think that's a way to look at it, and how you could bring some of these theory into practice. But it's always good to continue triangulating. So don't get carried too much away with what your customers is telling you. I mean, that's a very good data point, but you also have to look at suppliers, what's the competition is doing, what's the overall macro environment is doing, and how the different macro environments are connected across the globe. Because if something happening in China or US or India or Brazil or Africa, do not assume it's an isolated, everything is connected. So make sure you find these connecting points and take a helicopter view how things are connected, and try to bring some of these learnings from theoretical into practicality by being on the ground with your team, working with your teams. That's where you get a lot of these insights. I've found many situations where spending 2 hours on a customer site or a supplier site, or a recycling site, or a sustainability conference, etc., you learn so much, and you see things happening in practice that you say, "Oh, I remember learning this in academia or in college," but now you see it in practice, and you could connect the dots very quickly.
No, very, very well said. And I like how you said it's not just one like factor that you need to look at. Don't get carried away with one factor. Look at the bigger picture of all the different factors that kind of that play into it. That's very well said. Have you ever spent the process of innovating, bringing something into reality, in essence, going through or navigating all of these factors, only to launch something that didn't turn out the way you hoped it would? Does that ever happen to you in the many different like organizations and all of that, or to your team? And how do you help? What do you do after that, in a sense? Because I feel that's something that we all fear and that we all do at one point or another, in a sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, the innovation, just by definition, is you creating something that deviates from the norm. So when you create something that deviates from the norm, you're absolutely gonna misfire a few times before you get it right. Right? If you plan to make sure everything is perfect from the beginning, that means you're not innovating, right? You're just creating perfection, and that means you're not testing the boundaries of what's possible. Yeah, so had multiple failures. I mean, even in each step of along the way. And I think the way to think about it is, when you have one of these failures, you cannot feel sorry for yourself. You just look at it. I don't even call it a failure; it's a learning. So you could move on and try the next thing. And I have many of those also in the personal life. When you do investments in different companies and startups, some of them fail, some of them thrive. The ones that fails are also equally great learnings to see what did you miss, so you can do better the next time. So I think it's critical to make sure that you move fast, you fail fast, you document the learnings, and you do better the next time, right? So you cannot, if you misfire or you had one failure, you cannot stay down too long. You just need to stand up and just keep moving. Just pretend you're a bulldozer. You just turn the engine and keep moving. Don't stop, right? If you hit a big rock along the way, you get the small dents in yourself. That's okay. Just keep moving.
That's a good one. You remember, change before change comes to you, right? So same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Those with the failures. In terms of kind of like, how do you like switch off the emotion, or rechannel the emotion that comes with failure, in a sense? Because you are someone who's really smart. We can see academically, PhD, 3.9 CGPA in your MBA as well. For me, I feel like many people who are really, really smart academically struggle with the emotional aspect of failure in practice, in a sense. At least for me, I struggle so much with the emotional aspect of it, in a sense, because I always feel like I could have gotten an A in this project that we ran, or this thing that we did, in a sense, that at times I forget that I'm not being graded in real life, and that in real life you end up failing much more than you end up getting the A in most times, in a way. How do you deal with the emotional aspect of things?
Yeah, let me give you the real example why it was a very good story. My MBA in finance at the University of Delaware, why it was 3.95. Okay, I took
Okay.
I took 16 courses, 15 were an A, and one of them was an A minus. And I was lucky. Now I could say it in hindsight. I was lucky that the A minus happened at the beginning of the program. It's a 2-year program. So, and my first semester was one of those courses that's called management leadership. It was not very quantitative, so it's very difficult to to get a perfect answer. It's not like finance. I mean, finance, you get 100, right? Because it's a lot of math and accounting. So I was disappointed that first semester because I got an A-. I'm like, okay. So the 4.0 went out the window. But it was the best thing that ever happened, to be honest with you, because all the pressure, all the emotional pressure was released. Now I felt, okay, forget about perfection. Let's do the best we can going forward. And it was funny. I have my transcript still to remind me. So you'll see 16 courses, 15 A's, 1 A-. A- happened at the beginning. The reason I say that, because if you went 15 straight A's and then the A- happened at course number 16, it would have been a much bigger disappointment. So it was a little bit of lucky, to be honest, that it happened at the beginning. But that was what, 16, 17 years ago. So it's a good learning that perfection is not the answer. And that's why even I could tell you very openly when we look at resumes, when I hire people, during the assessment process, during the interview, I always ask questions: how you deal with failure, how you deal with emotional failures, what was your biggest successes, what were your biggest learnings, where you did not succeed at what you're doing, how did you pivot and learn from it? Because if you interview and hire people who have never had a problem, perfect, everything was perfect, at the first sign of challenge or trouble, it'll be a major challenge. So I think you need to be highly resilient. You should have failed. You have been through crises. You've been through some challenging times, and that's what makes you much stronger. Is a lot of these challenges that brings resiliency. So to me, that's really important to highlight, and it's a great point you bring up.
No, I like that a lot. And I like how you said get the failure out of the way in the beginning itself. So next time I fail, I'll just feel grateful, like, okay, this is the A- before the rest of the A's. Okay.
Exactly. That's if you go do your MBA finance at Wharton University, yeah, it's one of the best finance schools in the world. It's okay to get A- at the beginning.
Okay, I like that, and I think it's a good lesson for life as well. Sometimes I'm like, I'm starting a new project, I'm making all these cold calls, everyone is saying no, it's very sad. So now I'll just say this is just the A- period. Okay, relax. Okay, got it. I like that. uh, you manage today, as we mentioned earlier, various continents in a sense. So you don't just look at one country or one organization or one school that already stresses me and my team out. You look across continents in a sense, and there's so many things happening in the world every single day, from politics to social to ESG to supply chains. How do you keep track of all of these things? How do you manage and take in all of this information and be able to digest it in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's always back to my comment earlier at the very beginning around your network. Network doesn't mean just physical network; it could be virtual network, right? So I have friends, connections, professional contacts all around the globe. So right now, after this call, if you want to know what's happening in Malaysia or Thailand, I have friends there, either from previous company or current company or friends who moved there after they graduated from college. For example, I have a very good friend, really good friend. We went together at the university when we were at Florida, and now he's a professor at one of the top universities called Chulalongkorn in Thailand. Right? I mean, he's on my speed dial. If I need to know anything happening in Thailand locally, I just call him, and then he'll give me a rundown very quickly. He's a French guy. He married a Thai girl, and they moved there, and he's living happily there the last 20 years. Right? Just one anecdotal example, but that's how I get a lot of the intelligence that I need from many of these countries. I also have a lot of relatives that live in many different places in Europe, Asia, Middle East, Latin America, US, that I could get a lot of that intelligence. I also read. I'm not a big fan of reading big information. I distill it very quickly. But I do read a lot of snippets of information, like The Economist. Every morning when I wake up, I very quickly check the global news to see, when I go to meetings, make sure nothing happens in any of big countries that might impact what we're doing as a business or on a personal level. So I check the news very quickly. It takes me 3 minutes. Just check the headlines everywhere. Make sure you're fully up to speed on what's happening around in the world. That's on a daily basis, but on a more macro basis, longer term, I think rely heavily on your network. connect as much as you can, and that's where you could get a lot of intelligence that is not written in a newspaper or in the books. I mean, the newspaper will not tell you what's happening on the street in city number 4 in Thailand or Malaysia, right? You need to have a local contact to be able to know what's going on in the economy and the inflation, etc. So these are the things I think that can help a lot. And this network, you don't have to go crazy building it. Just start from scratch. When you go college, in my university, there were 20, 25 people in the class. 2/3 of them are international, and many of them moved to different states in the US. Some of them went back home. Some of them went back to Europe. Some went back to Asia. You just keep in touch over time. And if you need help, many of them now, 20 years later, they're professors at universities or vice presidents at different corporations. So make sure you maintain that network, because the same way they could help you, you could also help them. So it's a two-way communication. It helps everybody. 1 + 1 = 11, right? So
1 + 1 = 11. But I did not see that answer coming, and I think it is much more of a real and better answer than, as you said, only checking the news headlines and only looking at what's on paper, in a sense. No, that is a really good thing. I'm going to go and have to review my network. I'm going to be extra nice to everyone I meet in class today, just like, okay. But no, very, very well put, in a sense. As we wind down our conversation, I cannot believe it's already been 45 minutes. I'm very upset. I thought we had more time. It's so easy to talk to you. I'm so stressed now.
We could go 3 hours if you like. Yeah.
3 hours? Yeah, I think we need at least one session.
I just have a hard stop in 7 minutes. That's the only problem. So.
Oh, all right. Enough for today. I'll bug you later. But as we wind down like our conversation for today, one thing that I'm very curious about is, you are someone who doesn't just do things like in your role. Yes, you do phenomenally in your role, but you also support so many other things. I noticed you you advise startups, you invest, you supported Ascendance in the work that you do, you sponsor new initiatives, you always look at innovating both inside and outside of the organization. Why is it important to give back, in a sense, in your time, energy, and everything, in your wisdom? And why do you think that that's something that you've done, and why that's important to you?
No, this is part of my core. I think I would not be here having this interview with you if people didn't do it to me. I cannot name any specific person. I have a lot of names, and I don't want to miss anybody. But the fact that I ended up in Florida State University doing my PhD would not have been possible with a full scholarship. My parents and I could not afford paying that type of money for a PhD in chemistry in the US without a full scholarship. So I feel like I owe it to the university. I owe it to whoever gave me the money, to be able to replicate that model, because I feel like, and to that end, I don't like to publicize this or talk about it a lot, but I did the same at the Florida State University. I reestablished the same type of scholarship that supported me. So I donated back to the university to establish a similar type of scholarship to support new students coming to the university. And I keep adding it to it every year, and hopefully with time it'll be a very big number. So I think it happened to me. So that's the simple answer. If it happened to me, that's why I believe in it, because I'm the poster child of paying it forward. Somebody pay it forward to me. So I feel I have the obligation and the innate responsibility to be able to pay it forward for the next generation and just keep it going.
Thank you. Very, very nice answer. And I think it's something that we can
if
all
I didn't
do.
If I did not get scholarship to university, I will not be on this interview. I'll be doing something else probably, but I'm not sure what that would be. I'm sure I'll have done okay. But that's why I'm truly very strong believer in this, to continue propagating it forward.
Well, thank you. You gave us a chance to, when we really needed it, and I appreciate that. And I think everyone that you've helped similarly really, really appreciates it. And I think it's our duty now to pay it forward as well. And I hope everyone on this call also takes that opportunity to, in whatever way we can right now, create that opportunity for someone else. So thank you. Very, very lovely note to end this interview on.
No, thank you, Harsha.
And I appreciate you being on the show. I hope you had a fraction of the fun that I had. I have a lot of quotes now to digest and put up on my wall, from everything from changing before change gets me to just bulldozing my way through. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Harsha. Thanks for choosing me and then having this great conversation. And hopefully some of the stuff I shared will be helpful. And Not everything I said might be helpful, but hopefully some of the stuff will be helpful to somebody out there, and I'm happy to help in any way I can, even if it's improving anything by 1%. I think that's, to me, good enough on any specific case. So thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And with that, our interview for today has come to a close. To all watching, we appreciate you tuning in as always. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, let us know. Send us an email, text us, drop a comment, and we'll see you again on Thursday at 10 p.m. Bye.
Thank you.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.